Welcome back to the MTG Rebellion's Deck Tech and Sideboard Guide. Today we're featuring Bant Toxic in Standard, complete with deck building notes, a sideboard guide, and key takeaways. Now let's untap. So, why Bant Toxic sleeveless? We haven't seen the list put up many results here recently.
In my testing, Rictus, I found that we have favorable matchups against many of the Tier 1 decks. We're too fast for most draws by Temur Ramp and Domain. Azorius struggles to keep pace with their spot removal, thanks to the presence of March of the Swirling Mist and Scrolls Hive in our deck. Even our matchup against Esper mid is strong, thanks to the flexible nature of Bant Toxic.
With the printing of Thunder Junction, this archetype has largely been forgotten or shelved lately, but given the rise in Domain, Ramp, and Control, I see where this deck could start to make a resurgence. So, Sleeveless, let's start by identifying the core of this deck and where those flex slots are.
For our 1-drop creatures, we include 4 Skrelv Defector Might, 4 Venerated Rot Priest, and 4 Crawling Chorus. Skrelv offers hexproof and unblockable from 1 color at a time, safeguarding our creatures and enabling us to evade blockers. Rot Priest inflicts poison counters on our opponent when they target our creatures, effectively turning our opponent's removal spells against them. Crawling Chorus Death Trigger offers value against most removal as well, replacing itself with a Might token.
And I look at our 2-drop slot, and I'm seeing we have Skrelv's Hive, we've got Jawbone Duelist. What led to each of these decisions?
The Duelist puts substantial pressure on our opponents when paired with Skrelv. Skrelv's ability lets us to bypass blockers of a specific color and grants Toxic 1. When applied to Jawbone Duelist, it inflicts 4 poison damage for each unblocked attack. Skrelv's Hive continually spawns Toxic Might, ensuring relentless pressure on our adversaries. And once we corrupt our opponent by infecting them with 3 poison counters, Hive grants all of our toxic creatures lifelink.
So, moving right along to the 3-drop slot, we'll get back to the other 2 drops in a moment. We have Annex Sentry, we've got Delny Streetwise Lookout. I've seen everything in this slot from Charge of the Mites to Bloated Contaminator. So why did you shift over to do the Sentry and the Lookout instead?
Sentry serves as the Phyrexian equivalent of Brutal Cathar, boasting 4 toughness and the ability to exile creatures 3 mana value or less, as well as artifacts. Delny, our sole non-Phyrexian card, may seem out of place, but its ability significantly enhanced this deck's potency, whether by doubling Course's Death Trigger, Sentry's EBT, or granting the team unblockability.
The remainder of the deck includes 4 Experimental Augury, 4 Serum Snare, 4 March of the Swirling Mist, and 3 Bring the Ending. Of these 15 cards, at least 11 of these are flex slots that we've seen come in and out of the archetype. So why this particular configuration?
Experimental Augury and Serum Snare serve as our tempo cards with added reach. However, in general, any card that targets our creatures could substitute for them. It's essential to note that these 8 blue cards also contribute to casting March. Diluting the number of blue spells diminishes March effectiveness. March of the Swirling Mist is arguably the linchpin of the deck. It can be used offensively to shield multiple creatures, remove attacking threats, trigger Rot Priest multiple times, or eliminate blockers offensively. Lastly, Bring the Ending acts as a conditional counter that not only bolsters our defensive capabilities, but also grants us flexibility in executing our game plan.
So, looking past that, over the mana base, we utilized 4 Seed Cores, 4 Razorverge Thickets, 3 Seachrome Coast, 4 Sanctums, 3 Mirex, 1 Island, 1 A Darker Waste, 1 Aganjo, and 1 Otawara. Is this a fairly common depiction of the mana base for Bant Toxic lately?
With 15 lands capable of producing green mana turn 1, we have a 98% chance of casting any of our 1-drops turn 1. In addition to our dual lands, Seed Core serves as a rainbow land, enabling us to cast Phyrexians of any color, and boosting most of our creatures once the opponent is corrupted. Ganjo allows us to remove blocking and attacking creatures, while Otawara provides additional tempo advantage.
So now that we've seen the deck as a whole, let's get to the sideboard. But to do that, we're going to need some context. So we're going to put a minute on the clock, and we're going to get to that first critical matchup of Bant Toxic versus Domain.
Alright, versus Domain, we're going to lose 3 Bring the Ending, 3 Skrelv's Hive, or bring in 3 Spell Pierce, 2 Destroy Evil, and 1 Charge of the Mites. I understand that replacing counter magic with more counter magic might seem counterintuitive. However, against the Domain deck utilizing Cavern of Souls, our focus isn't on countering their threats, but rather on countering their removal and sweepers in the early game. Spell Pierce provides to be more efficient in this regard. Destroy Evil serves multiple purposes. It can either eliminate threats or a temporary lockdown at a strategic moment. Our strategy should prioritize early aggression and consistent damage output while evading their sweepers.
And I mean, from what I've seen of Domain, it's looking like it's going to bring in temporary lockdowns. It's going to bring in some more long goodbyes, and it's going to lose those up the beanstalks and probably the Atraxa. Why do you think that is?
Lockdown eradicates our board presence while long goodbye targets key creatures. On the other hand, Beanstalk, Splunking, and Recruiter don't provide immediate board impact, hence the swap.
We've seen new builds of Domain embracing Ancient Cornucopia and Lightning Helix. Do you think that, Bant Toxic is going to struggle with those particular builds?
It seems to me that those are Domain's way of metagaming against aggro decks that deal normal damage. We don't care about our opponent's life total. We only need 10 poison counters. Honestly, if Cornucopia replaces Splunking and Helix replaces Leyline, I think it puts us in an even better position. For example, Cornucopia won't draw them a card, and Helix wouldn't exile.
I mean, those are fair points. The life gain really doesn't matter to us. So let's head to the next matchup. Let's talk about Dimir Aggro.
Versus Dimir Aggro, we're going up 3 Spell Pierce and 1 Bring the Ending. We're losing 3 Delny, Streetwise Lookout, and 1 Experimental Augury. Our strategy hinges on deploying an early threat and maintaining tempo, focusing on countering and balancing only the most pertinent threats, not allowing our opponent to stabilize. Scrolls Hive shines in this approach, as it often overwhelms the Dimir decks with its relentless pressure, making it challenging for them to keep up.
I mean, last time I played this matchup, I was on the Dimir side, so I'm pretty sure they're going to be boarding in, Duress, Tishana's Tidebinder, Path of Peril. Tell me why those 3 tend to come in, though.
Path once again poses a significant threat to most of our deck. Deep Cavern Bat proves ineffective against us because our deck strength lies in its synergy rather than individual cards, and it will likely end up trading one of our creatures. We can expect those to be swapped out in favor of hand control and sweepers.
So, I mean, looking at it, is there a particular card you hate to see out of Dimir Aggro sideboard? And if so, which one is it?
Tishina's Tidebinder presents a significant problem for us. It can counter and shut down future Rot Priest and Scroll triggers, while also effectively blocking most of our creatures.
Fair enough. And you know what? Let's go on to Dimir's slightly more colorful sibling, Esper Midrange.
Versus Esper Mid, we're going up 3 Spell Pierce, plus 2 Annex Sentries, down 2 Serum Snares, and down 3 Delny Streetwise Lookout. To address Refrain, we're incorporating Destroy Evil and Annex Sentry into our strategy. Destroy Evil also targets Wedding Announcement and Temporary Lockdown. Our aim is to evade sweepers and prevent Refrain from dominating the field. With Scrolls Hive generating constant pressure, our goal is to finish the game before they can wear us down with their grindy tactics.
So, last I checked, Sleeveless, Esper Mid has access to Pest Control, Tidebinders, etc. to help their matchup against us, not to mention the occasional spare cut down sitting in that sideboard. So, why are they pushing those cards against us?
Pest Control wipes out a lot of our board, and Tidebinder, again, can shut down some of our more beneficial triggers. We can expect them to remove some of their more targeted removal.
Gotcha. So, I mean, I look at Esper Midrange. There's a couple different builds that have been running around lately. Which build of Esper Midrange concerns you more, though? The old school, like, Wedding Announcement iteration, or the more modern, low-curve, creature-heavy build?
The old school version of Esper is definitely more threatening. Wedding Announcement in particular poses a challenge. It provides blockers and draws cards for our opponent, allowing them to progress their game plan. The newer version seems to heavily rely on Deep Cavern Bats, which aren't great blockers. As long as we prevent Rafine from sticking around, we have a good matchup.
Okay, so you know what? Let's go on. And this isn't going to be the exact list because it's already been updated for the last week, but let's talk about Pro Tour finalist Azorius Control.
Versus Azorius Control, we bring in 3 Spell Pierce, 2 Destroy Evil. We're losing 2 Serum Snare and 3 Delny Streetwise Lookout. The game plan remains centered on tempo. We must adopt an aggressive stance early on while safeguarding our threats. The objective is to conclude the game before our opponent manages to stabilize. An early Scrolls Hive presents a problem for Azorius. Temporary Lockdown and Sunfall are cards that we need to be the most prepared for.
Now, Athena and I, we've been testing Azorius extensively. Actually, most of the Rebellion server has at this point. So I know we're likely going to be bringing in, those spare temporary lockdowns and those Tishana Tidebinders as well. How effective are those against Bant Toxic, in your opinion?
Temporary Lockdown is their best card against us, and Tidebinder can shut down some of our best triggered abilities. We can expect them to lose some of their more inefficient removal and card draw spells.
So, I mean, Sleeveless, I look at this. Is this a matchup that you find favorable currently? If so, why?
This matchup clearly favors us. We typically deploy more threats than Azorius can manage, and Skrell's Hive acts as a silver bullet in our arsenal. Successfully resolving the Hive significantly increases our chances of winning, as they essentially have no means of dealing with it once it's on the field.
That's a fair point. I mean, it's playing that tempo game plan against the control list that makes a lot of sense to me. But let's talk about the other side of that spectrum and look at fellow Speed Demon aggro deck, Boros Convoke.
Versus Convoke, we're going to go up 2 Destroy Evil, 1 Charge of the Mites, 2 Doorkeeper Thrall, and 1 Annex Entry, losing 3 Delny and 3 Skrell's Hive. Destroy Evil efficiently handles their enchantments and specific creatures. Charge can serve as either a removal tool or enhance our creature board. Thrall effectively neutralizes their enter the battlefield effects. In this particular matchup, Delny doesn't provide any substantial value, given that their creatures predominantly possess low attack power. Skrell's Hive tends to be too slow and comes at the expense of our life total. This matchup poses a significant challenge. Our strategy should focus on maximizing damage output whenever possible and staying vigilant to settable plays. For instance, we can set up a combo finish with Rock Priest and March. Additionally, we can utilize March and other cards in unconventional ways, such as phasing out a frontliner or bouncing a blood token with Serum Snare in response to a demolition.
Always a fun trick. Now, Boros Convoke, they tend to sideboard those pesky and the festivities into combat or speedy starts, but I've also seen, Lithomantic Barrage and Requisition Raid make the cut. What do you think the logic is that they're using there?
They're looking to be the control in this matchup and grind us out, slowing us down, then sweeping the board within the festivities or Requisition Raid. Unfortunately for us, Barrage kills most of our threats without being able to be countered.
Gotcha. So is this a matchup where we can successfully race them, or do they simply outswarm us before we can establish?
We can't race their most explosive draws, but on average, we are faster than them. That's why they transition into the control role post-sideboard.
That's a fair point, too. And I mean, an important one in sideboard guides is understanding when are you the beatdown, when are you playing control, and it's good to know that we are still the aggro against Boros Convoke. Now, that said, we're going to get to our final matchup right now. Temur Ramp, it's on a comeback kick. What are we doing here?
Versus Temur Ramp, we're going up 3 Spell Pierce, and we're losing 3 Delny Streetwise Lookout. In this matchup, the strategy is clear. Delny doesn't offer much value, and Spell Pierces should effectively counter our own curved sweepers. Adopt an aggressive approach and prioritize protecting your board. Say bring the ending for War Soul Rage, then they play an incredible amount of sweepers, so we need to keep that in mind when deciding what and when to play. Their sweepers don't exile, making Crawling Chorus an all-star here. Ignoring the life gain from their fetches gives us a significant advantage.
That's true. I mean, they do have a ton of incidental life gain in that, and we don't even care. Now, Temur Ramp doesn't tend to have a ton of early interaction, but, they will max out on Vampire's Vengeance to hold us in check if possible. So how effective is that strategy against us, Sleeveless?
Vampire's Vengeance can be devastating. Fortunately, it's damage-based and doesn't result in exile. If we keep this in mind while playing, our counters and a set of Crawling Chorus will help mitigate its effectiveness.
Now, I'm imagining Temur Ramp is one of our better matchups. Is this correct?
I definitely agree with that, especially regarding the version that relies on World Soul Rage as a finisher.
Fair. Alrighty, Rebels. We've gone through Bant Toxic in depth, dissecting the sideboarding strategy against 6 different Tier 1 archetypes, and this is going to bring us to our final segment, Key Takeaways.
Alright, Bant Toxic might be a death that most have forgotten, but with the main Temur Ramp and Azorius control on the rise, it can perform well. Its ability to transition from hyper aggro to tempo to a combo deck is unparalleled in standard. The trick relies in knowing when to apply the different stages that this deck is capable of. 2. Disregarding life gain cannot be overstated. We observe a significant incidental life gain in the format, from Temur Ramp gaining life through fetches, Deep Cavern Bat, and all the way to Acquisites. Being able to disregard that and defeat our opponent with poison provides a substantial advantage for Bant Toxic. Lastly, unconventional lines of play are crucial for success with Bant Toxic. Winning with this deck requires considering the larger picture, a principle applicable to all decks, but especially vital with Bant Toxic. Few decks can claim to embody aggro aggro, tempo, and combo strategies simultaneously, but Bant Toxic does.
And that'll wrap things up for us here at the Rebellion gang. Thank you for supporting us by watching this video until the end, and a special shout out to our members who have joined the Rebellion and support our content weekly. If you'd like to support what we do, be sure to like and subscribe. It's the best way to let us know you want to see more of this competitive MTG content.
Lastly, comment below if you have any sideboarding questions for Bant Toxic that you'd like answered. I've spent hundreds of hours testing this archetype, and I'm here to offer you that expertise.
Until next time, Rebels, untap, upkeep, resist.